that podcast the first time, I didn't catch that there were like two separate and distinct places where Harris talked at length about, and he was so careful with how he said this. Well, it appears maybe blacks resist more than anybody else. Now, maybe there's good reason for that, and that's, he kind of wrapped that around the part about how the police look like they rough black people up more than anybody else.
Yep.
So maybe it's justified, or maybe they just resist more. I mean, you know what I mean? It's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy that if you think the police are going to fuck with you, then how do you respond? Because in my opinion, what I would do is exact opposite of what it appears they actually do. I would just be so super polite that it would make it almost impossible for them to do anything. But I just never see that. Like in Michael Brown, which Harris mentioned that specifically, the whole thing about if you go at a cop, the cop has to assume there's a chance he's going to lose his gun.
Yep.
I mean, that's just common sense. And the fact that Harris even said, I guess this isn't obvious to lots of people. Like, to me, that's just, that's the first thought I have in any of these conversations is, well, of course the cop cannot let his weapon be taken. I mean, one, his own life's at risk. And, anybody that's crazy enough to fucking fight a cop, I would assume if I were that cop, that guy, if he gets that gun, there's a high probability he's going to shoot me.
Oh, dude, I mean, he's crazy enough to fight a cop. I mean, you said it yourself.
Right,
like, the cops just have such a difficult job. Like, it's almost an impossible job. And I think this is partially why, when we talked previously in the other show, it kind of makes sense to not have one type of police guy to respond to every single situation, is because there's not always a need for a guy with a gun to show up necessarily. But he does have a really good point in the sense that he's like, this is the most armed society on the planet. I mean, I have to admit this. I would not want to be a police officer who gets a phone call in Minneapolis about a domestic disturbance and think, okay, I'll not take my gun because I have no freaking idea what I'm walking into.
Right.
And I have to admit that that's a pretty scary, if you're that guy in that position, that's not something I would want to do.
The conclusions or the predictions he makes about, it was called the Ferguson effect.
Yeah.
About, if you think things were fucked up before, well, here's the end result of what's going to happen now. First of all, thousands of police officers are going to quit. Who the fuck would do this job?
Yeah.
Who you just couldn't pay me enough to do this job. And, just the fact that you do anything wrong and, thinking that you're going to be responsible potentially for the next series of riots that break out. But cops are just not going to show up for shit. They're just not going to. And who does that hurt the most? Blacks. I mean, how many times he said something like, well, you know who this philosophy hurts or this end result hurts?
Yeah,
it's
black business owners, black communities of color.
And then also his comments about people who claim victimhood when they're exaggerating. That hurts the cause. I mean, he must have said this hurts liberals, this hurts Democrats, this hurts the black community. My favorite line in the whole show was, I haven't heard anyone within 1,000 miles of Black Lives Matter acknowledge any of what I just